ஒரு பிராண்ட், அதாவது சென்னை மக்களுக்கு ரொம்ப ரொம்ப க்ளோஸ் டு ஹார்ட்னு சொல்லக்கூடிய பிராண்ட் ஒன்று சத்யம் சினிமாஸ்.
Let's argue whether the job of business is to make a profit.
One thing was most ideal in Chennai was the popcorn at Satyam. நம்ம விட்டல் தமிழ் பாட்காஸ்ட் ஆரம்பித்ததுக்கான காரணமே தமிழ்நாட்டிலிருந்து வர பிராண்ட்ஸ், தமிழ்நாட்டில் வர பிராண்ட் பில்டர்ஸ் கிட்ட பேசணும். அந்த நமக்கு ஃபேவரட்டான பிராண்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் எப்படி உருவாச்சு, அது எப்படி பண்ணாங்கன்னு தெரிஞ்சுக்கிறதுக்காக தான் அந்த பாட்காஸ்ட்டை ஆரம்பித்தோம். ஒரு பிராண்ட், அதாவது சென்னை மக்களுக்கு ரொம்ப ரொம்ப க்ளோஸ் டு ஹார்ட்னு சொல்லக்கூடிய பிராண்ட் ஒன்று சத்யம் சினிமாஸ். அது எல்லாமே எப்படி பண்ணுறது? அதனால் ஐ ரீச்ட் அவுட் டு மிஸ்டர் கிரண் ரெட்டி. அவர் சொன்னார், தமிழில் பேசணுமா நல்லா பேசணுமான்னு ஒரு ஆப்ஷன் கொடுத்தாரு. எனக்கு இந்த டீலிங் ரொம்ப பிடிச்சிருந்துச்சு. இங்கிலீஷில் பண்ணலான்னு முடிவு பண்ணோம் இந்த பாட்காஸ்ட்டை. ஸோ வித்வுட் ஃபர்தர் அடு, மிஸ்டர் கிரண் ரெட்டி, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, sir.
Mr. Kiran, when I come from Coimbatore, I moved to Chennai in 2000. With a great twist of fate, I ended up at the new college, and I went more to a compound that is next to new college, which was Sathyam Cinemas, then new college itself. So I'm glad about what happened to Sathyam Cinemas. But even before we get there, can you tell us something about yourself, your family, how you got into the family business? Because people don't know of you at all.
It's probably good that it's that way. No, I came into a situation where I went to the US to study my master's, and I came back. And my family had financial troubles at that particular point in time. So that building was meant to be broken down and converted into a hotel.
Wow.
Okay, so it was not meant to be there. So, and it was because of the financial troubles at that point in time that project was stagnant, and the cinema was just the way it was.
Right.
And we went through. It took us a while for us to get out of that. In the interim, when I came back, I had no place in the regular businesses. I had, maybe I had been indoctrinated in the US with an MBA, being idealistic. So I came back. Right. Didn't felt like I connected with anything else. I had no place.
What was the family business like?
There were multiple businesses, but really for me the thing was I had no place in that. It was either things were stuck or I just didn't felt like I connected. Okay. So this was like kind of a thing that I thought, let me spend a little bit of time in this, and there was a power plant that I was working on, which we had a license for, and the financing of that. So these were the two things that I could spend some time on. This was my first consumer experience. Mm-hmm. And there was very little money that was being made by by the cinema at that point in time, but it was so immaterial to the family that they let me just do whatever I wanted with that thing. It was probably very, very small, maybe in the region of about maybe even 15-20 lakhs a year. So wow. I would take that amount of money and just say, listen, let me invest it back and put it back in things. It's not material to anybody, so let me just put it back and see what happens. Because the things were some very basic things about just cleanliness of the toilets. It was a unionized place. It was a place that was a bit dilapidated. So just a simple act of just seeing if we can do a little bit more, and that's how I got started. I think it must have been probably maybe 3-4 years before I started seeing that as something that I wanted to spend more time. Mm-hmm. So in the first so many years it was just something that was there, and then it's a bit of, let's call it play money, that you're basically saying, okay, let's see what happens. I think essentially what happened at that time was the little changes. People who came to the cinema and started noticing the little things. And that was just my first time that I've actually felt, that, you make a difference and you get that feedback, and you're getting that constant feedback loop, that it's making a difference to somebody. And I think it just got me on the treadmill of wanting to make that difference in people's experiences. So that was just the starting point.
Which period was this, the 4 years you mentioned?
Probably came back from my graduation, I'm thinking from 95-97, so it's probably about 97. Okay, and from then onwards sort of thing.
So would I be right if I said the first?
My memory is really poor, so I'd always just say that, for some period it's a blur. So remember, it's a long time.
A blur is always a good thing. Exactly. In that respect, right? So the first one within Sathyam Cinemas was Sri. Was that the first?
That's true.
Innovation?
That was actually, it was already built as 4 screens at that particular point in time, but there was just an empty box.
Oh.
Okay. And for why, when they built it 25 years ago, at that point it was built in the 70s, so maybe 20 years ago, that they had that extra box that they never finished. Okay. So it really was just the completion of something that was originally intended at that point in time.
So So I see a lot of family businesses, a lot of people start within family businesses say, I got this because my family wanted me to do this. And it looks like you've done what you did because of lack of family interference in the business.
I think in so many ways, that's why you tend to think that you do something. You're really placed in an environment where things are, you're not the master of that. You're actually placed in an environment. At that particular point in time, when I came back with the family being in difficulty, when I came back from the US, my goals were this. It was, if I had $1 million in the bank account, if I had a home and I had a job, given all the financial difficulties of my family, I'd be quite happy with that. So every time I keep thinking back to it and saying that how much more the universe has given me than I've asked for.
Wow.
Okay, and so it's a constant reminder that I'm grateful for everything that's happened, post that. If I didn't have that difficult circumstances that I started with, I might have gone down a different journey. I might have done something different. And my entire life was dictated by the circumstances that were at that point in time, which I thought were really difficult. But actually those difficult circumstances were the starting point for my own journey. So I'm grateful for that too.
That's deeply philosophical and very introspective in what you're saying. But I want to stick to my favorite part of the conversation. A brand or an institution like Sathyam Cinemas could not have happened without a vision. As much as you're saying it was one box I took and converted, you could convert it into anything. It wasn't just clean. It was a completely different experience.
But just remember, it's not a vision that even was apparent at that point in time. So, and I think in most businesses, we tend to look at it in retrospect and start thinking that we had enormous clarity when we start something.
Right.
We actually have no clue. Okay, the evolution of a vision also arises over the period. You do things, you get some feedback, some things you change, some things you correct, and over a period of time you start getting clearer and clearer about what you want that business to be. But there were some fundamental elements to that. They were undefined. So the vision was still undefined, but there was probably some sense of it. At the underlying thing, if I have to go back, there was an underlying pattern, the desire to create a better experience for somebody else.
Right.
And that's all it is. And maybe that's the constant that still remains in my life. There's a desire to create an experience for other people. That's it.
It's beautiful. I think a lot of businesses are in. So I tell a lot of my clients that whether you're selling a product or a service, remember that you are in the experience business. And I think what you're saying adds up beautifully to that. I get that you might not have had a vision when you started. Did you have any inspiration when you started?
I think a lot of inspiration, but actually not from cinemas.
Okay.
I think simply because I think when you look at your own field, very often it's very limiting. And you really have to look outside your field. For me, one of the early inspirations actually came from, there were some cinemas, and I would say that some cinemas, for example, especially in Asia, like for example in Thailand at that point in time, there are a few others that had done a good job. They broke the mold of what was a templated cinema, like the US went down the route of being a very templated cinema.
Right.
Okay, which is, they're pretty much standardized boxes with a certain pattern. They were not the really lovely days of cinema where you had the cinema palaces. And I think if you go back and see books from the 30s, 40s, 50s, you would see these beautiful buildings similar to like opera houses that were designed where people would go and watch a cinema. And so part of it was there was a desire to create that sort of thing. So it is that magical place where you go to watch a movie, where you go once in a while. The second is you'd see few cinemas that were inspirations, but then you start looking at other businesses. And really for me the two inspirations came from, one was retail businesses, like luxury retail and things like that. You really saw how they were trying to create the environment, and how the environment created a desire for you to engage with that brand. And at that point, casinos, because they were, especially in Vegas, there was the whole period where Vegas was going through its renewal at that point in time, and then you had new casinos come in. There was Bellagio, there was multiple others that came in at that particular point in time, but each one trying to create a greater and greater experience and create a really wow experience. So there was a bit of an inspiration from, we used to have a trade show that happened in Vegas. So that itself, it was called, and right now it's called CinemaCon, but it used to be called something else. And so I used to go there annually. So that became an inspiration itself, that, how do they create this really places that change the way you view something. Like, there are, I always think of this, if you do something incrementally, you don't, essentially what you do is you make people come back a little more often. Maybe what they do is they change, they stop going to one place and they come to another. So You can gain market share by doing something incremental. But if you want to increase the size of the market, you really have to do something that's fundamentally different. Okay, and really, I think that is a recognition and a realization that I had earlier. If you see even the casino business, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened in Macau. In Macau, there used to be just one or two casinos. There used to be licensed. I forget the name of the casino also that used to be there, and the business was about maybe $1.5 billion or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there was this whole host of casino licenses were given, and people thought, look, the market's just $1.5 billion. Now with so many licenses being given, so many new hotels, will the market collapse? Okay, and it became the fastest growing market. One of the things that taught me that was great supply creates demand. Okay, that we tend to see demand as finite and fixed, but demand is not finite and fixed. Is dictated by great supply. So when you do something that's truly exceptional, you change people's behaviors and habits.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's in fact, this goes on to a question I wanted to ask you a little later on, but I'll ask it now.
Sure.
I see a lot of, given that you said you got inspiration for the theatre going experience from casinos and luxury retail. There are a lot of brands in India today, and not just experiential brands, right? Even product FMCG brands where I come from. These brands are inspired from what's there in the West.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of American snacks, the peanut butters, and they're really expensive products. They struggle to find a footing beyond the top 0.1% of the Indian population. Mm-hmm. How would this work for them? They're creating them, supply in FMCG is a lot easier to create. How would this philosophy of saying supply creating demand, it goes back to also the UAE mantra of saying you build and they will come.
Yes.
Would it apply to
let me not talk about other brands, but I can tell you how it applied to us.
Sure.
There was something which again was, at that point I thought was a big disadvantage, big liability. The government had capped our ticket prices at 120 rupees for 7 years.
Right.
And for a 7-year period, just imagine that, you can't even increase your ticket prices even with the rate of inflation.
Right.
Of a ticket price of 120 rupees, just remember that the tax rate was probably around 30% of the gross amount. So you're already losing,
I'll limit your take, and I will also take tax from it.
So it's limited, it's highly taxed. Okay, and you end up in a situation where you have only that much income that comes from, from movie tickets.
Right.
So what do? You learn how to do the business without that lever, okay, without operating the price lever. I really think that's what taught me how to do the business. When you push to a corner, you learn that there are other levers that you can actually take. So that's why you learned about, the food business has to be something that's really good, and that has to drive our profitability. We got our Revitalizing in place. So the ancillary businesses and the fundamental, we started thinking, if the ticket price cannot be changed, what can we change? We can change occupancy. Okay, and we started focusing on increasing occupancy. One of the ways to increase occupancy is to do the best thing that you can, and more people come. It's relatively simple. I mean, it kind of sounds like something that seems okay. Maybe in retrospect, it seems relatively simple. You simply do the best thing that you can, and more people will come.
Wow. So that takes me to the next question I had, even as you were describing it, ticket prices were capped, and you were also based in Chennai, which is known to be, and rightly so, as a very conservative market, not really a market where people spend money on experiences, and they're very frugal on the way they spend. And it's not really the most, I wouldn't say not world aware, but a little less outgoing than a city like a Bombay or a Delhi.
Possibly.
Did that not become a problem?
Actually, it's an advantage. You come to a city where you have limited opportunities, and then if you create some value, that becomes the primary, it stands out. I think part of the, I think we were talking about this earlier, that what made this brand feel like people's own. It was a brand that Chennai had that they could cheer for, they felt like that was their own. Because it's a brand that was constantly striving to improve their experience, and it's a brand that they could feel a sense of pride with. So when somebody came from somewhere else, they felt like this is a place that they could show in Chennai. It made it easier that Chennai had fewer places to show at that point in time. But so actually, in so many ways, the brand being created that way is not just what we did, but it was also a set of circumstances that presented itself at that point in time. There was a space, Chennai, the people here love movies. There was an opportunity to create something that's really beautiful. Something that really beautiful got people to feel like this was something special about, what Chennai had in possibly over some of the other cities, that made them feel a sense of pride towards, Chennai. The way, for example, the Super Kings in some way has a sense of pride. And that really, it just manifested that way, I would say.
It gave a community, the city, which had very little about itself to cheer for, and another reason to cheer for.
I would
cheer
think so.
themselves
I can't sound so negative about it, but I think Chennai hadn't progressed. I mean, at that point in time, as much as some of its neighboring cities had progressed,
Right.
and so it was always seen as we would get things after other cities would.
Right.
Okay, so in some area, it was nice to be ahead of the game, I suppose, in some way.
So, if it was so simple, why haven't people replicated it?
No, I think it's simple when you view it. It depends on how you view it. It's so simple when you come from the clarity that the reason that you exist is to serve people. That you don't exist because you want to make money. You exist because you have an opportunity to serve people, and the byproduct is making money. When you seek to make money, it actually becomes a little more evasive than you think it is. So for me, all I cared about, at least in the business, was that I'm able to create a better experience. I think the money came as a byproduct of that.
Okay, I have another question. It will
Yeah.
be very rude, especially given that this is a Tamil podcast.
You sure?
So I came from Coimbatore,
Mm-hmm.
and I found the people in Chennai extremely rude. And I found as I traveled, I saw a similar reaction in Delhi, where people are. Coimbatore speak really respectful Tamil, right? Whether they're nice to you or not, the language is very polite. In Chennai, I found the language extremely difficult to handle. And the one place where I saw the local boys serve to please was at Sathyam Cinemas. You having a vision, and you having, whether you claim not to have had the vision, but wanting to do something hygienic and make it clean the best possible is one thing. But getting a team of young boys to behave in line with what you were doing, that's completely different. How did you manage that?
I don't know how I managed it, but I'll tell you that I got lucky with so many things. One, I got lucky with somebody who, now, Mona, who now runs Basque over here. I don't know if you've
Right,
been
I've
to
been
Basque.
Basque.
I think that's FM. So she was, I'll have to say that if she ever listens to this, she was not the best head of HR. Okay? Because she was not really good at processes. But she was the most amazing person. Okay? And to have somebody like that to head our human resources, okay, meant that there was a company culture where the company truly cared about people. And she was an example of that. As much as sometimes, from my side, there would be a certain behavior towards employees, Mona really was the person who anchored how the organization treated its employees. It's simply a byproduct of that the organization values its customers, the organization values its employees. They treat both of them really well. The byproduct is that the employees treat the customers really well.
So the boys at the counter did not have targets to sell?
None.
Oh.
I don't think there was. See, I don't believe in targets. I think targets create skewed behavior. At some point there was some experimentation. We did have, of a little bit of upselling, things like that. I was never for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I think we pretty much the targets were mostly service-oriented targets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, really about getting people served, and quicker and easier, and make it easier for people rather than focusing them on revenues. Look, first to be clear, how much control do they have on revenue at that particular point in time? Probably less, and to put the pressure on them is kind of unfair. Second, it creates a certain misalignment. I find that any target, okay, let's put it this way, any metric has unintended consequences.
Could you explain that more?
Okay. So for example, let's assume that I create a metric that somebody's got to increase my profitability.
Yep.
Or increase revenue, because I have no ability to increase profitability. So at the ticket counter, so how to increase profitability? Upsell, for example. Sell people more or sell people bigger sizes. So you're encouraging people to buy more than what they need. What ends up happening is that actually you're not serving the customer. You're doing disservice to the customer. Do you think creating disservice to the customer creates a long-term value for a brand? When the brand is misaligned with their customer, okay, if the brand makes money from something that's not good for the customer, that can't necessarily be good for the brand in the long term. And I think that very often companies put their employees in very difficult situations. So we've never put the employee in a difficult situation with respect to our customer. And a lot of companies do that. They actually put their companies at the front of stupid policies at the back end. So, so effectively the employee has to justify to the customer why the company has something that's really stupid.
Wow. So that they could refuse to abide by a policy?
No, but there would not be a policy that, they wouldn't need to think. Look, for example, is serving a customer quickly, is that a beneficial thing for a customer or not? They would agree it's beneficial.
Right.
Serving a customer politely, would it be beneficial to customer? It will be not. Selling more to a customer, is it beneficial to customer? No, it's questionable.
Right.
So we would not ask them to do something that's questionable.
Wow. I would usually say this kind of a philosophical approach to business is a luxury few can afford.
I don't know about that. And remember that, look, again, what you're getting from me right now is a mix of a part of me now and a part of me then. So who knows which one's what, okay, at that particular point in time. But at the essence, something I got right at that point in time. And I say got right, that this approach was the right approach. The approach that money is simply a byproduct of what you do. The approach that you have to do what's right by you rather than what is profitable to you.
Conscience.
I don't know, at that point I might have gone with the thing of values, a certain set of values that the organization had, and those values were putting the customer first. Right now I might go slightly beyond values, but let's not get into that territory. That might be I still tend to think that even values tend to be a stepping stone to something that's beyond values.
Can you go down that path?
Okay, if you really want to.
I'd really want to know.
Let's put it this way. Okay, is killing a person a good or bad thing?
Depends.
That's true. So if you had a value that I will not kill somebody, or I will not hurt somebody, is that a value that may not serve you at some point in time? If you're doing that to defend, your family, okay, you're doing that to protect lots of other people, is that something that is something that you would do and should do? So how would you know if a value is right or wrong? It's hard to know in absolute terms. So it is contextual. Now the problem is, how do you make decisions that are contextual? You cannot make decisions from contextual because we are not conscious enough, because we don't operate from a higher state. It's very difficult to us to make the right decisions contextually. So values tend to act as an intermediate stepping stone. When we're not conscious enough to make the right decision that is appropriate at that point in time. But there's a point in time where you move in a direction where you move towards greater consciousness, that you realize that even values are simply a stepping stone, and you will know at that point in time what the right thing to do is.
Were there any thing you need to correct as you were building Sathyam Cinemas with these values?
Plenty of things. Oh,
at a value level?
No, at a value level, I was kind of an idealist anyway. Okay, I think there was this. When I was a kid, I was an idealist. Somehow, I was becoming a realist, and I've come back to being an idealist. So I'm happy to come back home.
So what was the transition from idealism to realism?
Oh, just the thing that this is the way the world functions and this is the way that we need to. And I think I didn't become too much of a realist, thankfully. Okay, but I became a little more of a realist than I should have, maybe. It was that, like for example, right now in idealist, I can see everyone's lovely. And actually, I feel everyone's lovely. It's actually relatively simple. If you only see the lovely side of people, everyone's lovely. Everyone's got stuff. I've got stuff, I've got baggage, I've got things that are probably not particularly pleasant. But why focus on that? I'm not focusing on my unpleasant stuff. So why not focus on just the pleasant stuff of everyone? And when you see everyone is lovely, they feel a certain way in your presence because you genuinely feel that way.
Lovely. Speaking of idealism, one thing was most ideal in Chennai was the popcorn at Sathyam. When a brand becomes this close to people, there are rumors about this brand. So there are rumors I've heard, I'm not sure if it's true, that somebody was sent scouting for the best popcorn in the world by Sathyam, and they discovered this popcorn in Canada or the northern part of America. They brought it back, and that's the same popcorn that's available across most cinemas in India. Is that a true story?
There's partly truth to it, but I don't think it's in that way.
Okay.
Look, we did really want to improve our popcorn, and at that point in time, I think most of the popcorn was actually from India. So you didn't have popcorn that was available from abroad. I think our desire was to look for the best. So we did, so in a trade show, for example, we ended up, meeting somebody that we resonated with, and they actually had a really good preferred popcorn. And so we built a relationship with them, and then we started this entire journey. So really, part of it is true that we went out seeking for really good popcorn, but we found lovely people. And so more than the best popcorn, it was lovely people that we actually had a good business relationship with.
Right.
And maybe it's that energy of lovely people with good popcorn and all of that comes together.
So operating from this point of abundance and luxury that very few people can afford.
And as I was talking earlier, I think operating from abundance is not a state that comes from absolute resources or wealth. It comes of the state of gratitude. So if you feel abundant, then you feel like you have enough for yourself and you have surplus to give. If you don't feel abundant, you feel scarce. You feel like you don't have enough and you need the world to give you more. Okay? That has got nothing to do with absolute wealth, which is why you will see a person who's extremely rich feeling scarcity and feeling like the world they need to get more. You will see a person who's relatively poor who takes their surplus earnings and able to feed somebody else because they operate from a state of abundance. So how do you build abundance? You build abundance through gratitude. You're grateful for what you already have, not for the things that you want, but for all the things that you already have. A simple tool, for example, that I tell people, if you want to build abundance, take an amount that's not material to you. And let's say for somebody it's 10,000 rupees, say up to 10,000 rupees, let's say.
Okay.
And you say for an amount of less than 10,000, if you ever encounter a person that you have to negotiate with, let's say a street vendor. Okay. Very often when you go to a street vendor, the person will quote something. Right. And you'll try to negotiate something because that's the norm. They'll quote 100 or 200 or something and you'll say, I want it for 150 or whatever that thing is. Why not do the reverse? Negotiate upwards. So for example, if somebody says 200, why not say, I'll give you 300? The person is going to be confused because the person won't understand what you're trying to do. Okay. We actually have very limited opportunities to negotiate nowadays because half our things are bought on Amazon, things like that, we're a fixed price.
Right.
Okay. But the few opportunities that we get, negotiate upwards. Every time we negotiate, we're telling our subconscious we don't have enough. Every time you give, you're telling your subconscious you have enough. It's fine that you're negotiating for something that's really large, something significant, your life depends on it. Perfectly okay, negotiate. But for the number of things that we negotiate, all we're doing is programming our mind to feeling like we don't have enough.
Does this tie back to manifestation? Do you have a take on manifestation at all in business?
Probably some, I'm not sure. What I can say is that in the way that I see manifestation right now is that you set out a desire. It doesn't mean that you set out the desire and it actually happens. You set out the desire and work towards the desire. Okay, and then so that to me is manifestation. But people tend to think of manifestation as simply that setting the desire out in itself. I think for me, the benefit came that somehow I got aligned to manifesting for the larger good.
I'm going down a path in this conversation which I don't necessarily propagate.
Okay.
Where I face a lot of brands. So I want this clarity from you because you're talking about having larger purpose, right? So a lot of brands that I meet and talking about hardcore marketing and brand building, they say my brand's got a purpose and my brand purpose will guide what I'm doing. The point, I have a contrary point to that, saying assigning a purpose to your brand is almost a shortcut to figuring out what your brand should be, your positioning, your proposition, and everything. Some people overplay the purpose angle. I'm saying it's not about the brand purpose, it's about your brand's role in customers' life. Is there a difference between the two, in your opinion?
Yes, I think there's a difference. When people say the brand purpose, they think that the brand is purposeful. Actually, a good brand will serve the customer's needs, and that's all there is. So it's not that it's necessarily purposeful. I think the purpose goes beyond the brand. If you're somebody truly purposeful, it comes from the founder's purpose of why the brand exists. Does the brand exist to serve the founder's needs, or the brand exists for the founder to contribute to society? If a brand exists to serve the founder's needs, it cannot be a purposeful brand. I used to think, and maybe I'll rephrase it this way. I used to think there are businesses that are impactful and not. Okay, there are certain impact businesses, certain businesses are not impactful. Now I've changed my perspective on that. There are founders that are impactful or not. The businesses are simply tools for that. So any business can be an impact business. Any business that's perceived to be an impact business may not be an impact business because, let's say, even a non-profit may actually be serving the founder's ego. And then it's not an impact business because everybody is then simply a tool to serve their pride and ego. How can you be impactful that way? You might have a business, for example, that may not seem like an impact business. So, for example, you take an alcohol business, may not seem like an impact business. But if you had an impactful founder behind that, then he'll say, listen, the reason for me serving alcohol is for people to celebrate. I will not serve alcohol for people to get drunk. That's not my desire. So all their efforts will be in, let me focus on in where people use alcohol for the right reason and not use alcohol for the wrong reason. So they can bring that impact perspective even into businesses that you don't think are normally impactful. So I've stopped thinking of the right and wrong businesses are impactful. I used to think like that certain businesses were impact businesses, certain businesses. Now I'm thinking it's the intent that you bring to that business that makes it impactful or not. And most businesses are coming from a place of lack for the individual. That I lack something. I lack success. I lack sense of achievement. I lack money. I lack all of that. And my business has to get the world to give it to me in some form. What happens if you feel exactly the opposite? I feel fully secure. I don't need my self-worth to be enhanced in any way because I'm secure. I feel abundant. I don't need that much more money. Okay. And then what do you end up with? Will you end up doing nothing? No. But you come from that state, and then the business becomes simply a way to contribute. So think of it this way. Very often people go in this route that society serves their company that serves their personal need. For most business, that's all it is. Your customers are simply a tool for your company to profit from, and the company is simply a tool for you to benefit, whether monetarily, societally, socially, whatever it is.
Right.
What happens if you invert it? That the company is, that you contribute through your company to society. That that the society, your contribution to society happens through your company. So you see, you serving your company that serves society.
Just to make it clear for the listeners and viewers, you're not talking about social services.
It doesn't have to be social service. Take any business and start thinking yourself as, can I be of service to my company, and that can my company be of service to society? Whatever you're doing marketing, can you be of service to the other people? Will some of your needs not be met by the thing when you're of service? Of course your needs will be met. But it's a question of which one do you put first.
This again pushes me to something you mentioned earlier. We're pushing for that 1% more profit, 1% more growth. I'm not sure if you read Atomic Habits.
Yes.
The 1% adds up, right? And the job of businesses is to make profit. How is it right for a business owner to not focus on that 1%?
Let's argue whether the job of business is to make a profit.
Okay then. Okay, why should a business exist otherwise?
To serve society. It has a product or service through which it's serving the needs of its customers. To do it sustainably makes sense. I'm not suggesting that you do it unsustainably.
Right.
Okay. Profit is a sustainable way of saying, what's the advantage of having profit? You can serve more people.
You're sounding like Dhoni, who focuses on the process than the result of a match.
I don't know, but but I would say there's more joy in the process than the result of the thing. Because let's look at results. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Right.
So which means, are you going to go up and down in your emotion? But if you enjoy playing the match, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. You've had a great time.
Given we come back to a Dhoni CSK reference, I've seen people who say Indian consumers in general are value conscious. They will not spend too much money. I differ with that opinion. I think every consumer is value conscious, not necessarily price conscious, as people mean to imply. Very rarely have I seen a brand change the customer's behavior, as in involuntarily. For example, we are not the cleanest of community. We make a mess in general. We kind of make a mess and we almost take pride in having a good time and messing places up. For the first time, I saw people clean up where they were seated at Sathyam Cinemas. They weren't incentivized to do it, but they had a feeling that it was their duty to keep the place clean. And we still haven't got it even at the higher end of the society, if I can say. How does that happen?
So one of the initiatives that he had, just actually probably maybe even 6-8 months before we sold the business, was really to start thinking of the cinema as a platform for impact of some sort. Now we know that, so just to think of it, the cinema had a large number of viewers coming through the cinema. So in terms of absolute numbers, maybe the railway station and stuff like that would have been probably higher, or the bus stations would have probably been higher, but we had a large number of people coming through. So all we said was, can we create small nudges? small ways in which people can think. So for example, our movies always start on time, never get things. There's exactly a time and it'll start on that time, which means the show starts at that particular time. See, very often what happened was most of the places, the ad started at that time. Okay, we've decided that this thing, for some reason we decided that the show started time, but we never delayed it. I mean, unless there was some emergency or there was a particular situation that created a whole jam. But, so there was this thing of you come on time, otherwise you miss it. Nobody's, things are not delayed, things are things. So that means that just the perception of something starting on time. What does that do? It creates a habit of, coming for things on time. Okay. Certain things that we would, like for example, that you would clean up after things. So we encourage people to clean up. You would have a certain set of things. You would actually put a certain set of nudges on screen, saying that, requesting things. And slowly, once you see 2-3 people doing it, that slowly becomes contagious. Over a period of time, you see more and more people. What we are hoping for is a small nudge, some small start, somebody else noticing the same thing, okay, and thing. The second is we kept our environments clean. Right. And to keep toilets really clean, we put an enormous amount of effort in trying to keep, toilets clean. Simply because that's a place they would have expected it not to be clean. When you put in that effort, you start seeing that people respond to the effort. They've responded in different ways. People come there, people come there, dress up and come. When the environment is really beautiful, people like to also dress up and come to that environment, because then somehow they feel like, coming to this environment, for a lot of people in the middle class, maybe this was something special, or lower middle class, this was something special.
They feel more like they belong in the environment.
Yes, exactly. But what was really beautiful, and I think I have to give credit to Chennai, that's a place which was inclusive for everyone. Okay, the price was the same, it was affordable, so somebody really wealthy, somebody not so wealthy could be sitting right next to each other. Right. And somehow we didn't find any disadvantage with that, and people felt very comfortable with that. So I think there was something lovely about that business, that it became so inclusive.
Okay, you can feel free not to answer this question, but I want to ask you this. I've seen the amount of people cleaning up after a movie when they go to Sathyam Cinemas. From the time it's become PVR, I don't see as many people cleaning up.
I really don't know. I haven't gone much to the movies after that, so really don't know. So there's nothing that I can comment on something that I don't know.
Good one. You spoke about abundance and giving. Now, I'm a marketing guy, right? We go for growth. We see a business that's growing. It might not be profitable today. In fact, profits almost become a bad word for a lot of investors.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. It's changing this year.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of businesses going after growth. What has a business been like you? How does a business been like you approach this kind of business?
I don't know. I'm just more traditional businesses, a business person. So I don't know. I don't resonate with that way of doing things. It's not my way. I mean, good luck to them.
No profit
which
business,
is simply, spending money to grow and then hoping somehow the business is going to convert into profitability. The challenge with that is simply this. Even if you thought that was a sensible business strategy, which is, you underprice something, use price as a way or marketing as a way to build your business, and then at some point of time you get the volume that makes it profitable by itself, or that at that point in time it becomes sticky enough that you can cut down the thing or increase the price. Okay, at which point, then it becomes profitable. I don't know how much has played out, in businesses. I don't know if I have to go back over the past 10 years and say how many businesses have truly been able to make the switch. Okay, personally, I think the switch is also hard because one, you got your customers used to how they engage with your brand. But the second is also you have a culture that has not been a profit culture, and try to pivot a culture back to one thing or the other. I've had enormous challenges creating a culture. So I don't know. You probably have a better sense of how many brands have actually transitioned and moved and become profitable.
I can hardly think of any.
So my challenge is that a reasonable strategy to play? I don't know. But also I have this thought process on strategy. I don't think there's really the right or wrong strategy. The question really comes down to, is this the right strategy for you given your context? Okay, I could not operate with that strategy.
Right. No, I think there are some businesses that are well placed, like you said, to operate that way. Because Amazon India doesn't make money.
So let me talk about marketing a little bit, and I'll get a different perspective on this from you.
How did you sell and why did you sell Sathyam Cinemas? What is it that you do without Sathyam Cinema or outside after Sathyam Cinemas was sold? The behavior of people who went to Sathyam Cinemas was elevated to a different plane.